On this episode of Locked On Canadiens, Montreal went into Florida and swept the series against both Florida teams, and Marty St. Louis can never shave ever again.
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to episode 1213 of Locked On Canadiens. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day and for subscribing wherever you get your podcast. Doing that supports the show and ensures you don't miss an episode. My name is Ian Boisvert, also known as That Maybe It's Ian. I am joined as always by the incomparable Laura Saba, also known as the Active Stick. Laura, Montreal went into Florida and won both games very handedly against the Florida Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning. How are we feeling coming out of those two games?
You know the concept of an elite hater? Like, I consider myself an elite Tampa hater, right? Florida, I actually like, Florida's a team that I would like the Habs to emulate a little bit, right? I like what they've done in the last few years, including winning the Stanley Cup, obviously. But Tampa, even when they were winning the Stanley Cup, I hated them so hard. And I love that despite all of that, the Montreal Canadiens managed to surprise. They won two games. They won two games that they historically have a lot of trouble winning. And I know you've got you've got your nerdy information about that. I love doing this show with Ian because I learn so much, and a lot of it is like trivia that I know eventually I will use and win trivia games with. So Ian, let you do your spiel, and then we'll get into how much we hate the Tampa Bay Lightning.
Yeah, so I'll do a quick rundown of our show. We're going to talk about that sweep, just how we feel coming out of it with the Canadiens taking both games in Florida. We have to talk about Jakub Dobes stepping in, and maybe that's Montreal's answer in net for the rest of the season. And the second line is heating up. We'll do a What's Up Doc segment to close out the show and talk about what's going on with that second line after a great performance in Florida from Kirby Dach and company, and they followed it up with another strong one in Tampa. But the thing I picked up on before the game was I can't remember the last time Montreal went into this late December series against these two Florida teams and escaped with all 4 possible points. And the last time that happened was 15 years ago, 2009, December 30th and 31st of 2009. Montreal had a 2-1 win in overtime win in Tampa, Placanet scoring the game-winning goal there in overtime, and a 5-4 win in Florida with Benoit Pouliot getting the game winner in the third period. So 15 years it's been since Montreal.
Name I haven't heard in a while.
Yeah, he's a great trivia question for like a bunch of different things. So like that's how long it's been since Montreal has gone on this trip. They do this trip just about every year. There was a lot of years in there where they took 3 out of 4, or maybe they won 1 and lost the other, but they never win both of these games. And Montreal walked into Florida on Saturday afternoon, and they did not trail, and they won. And they walked into Tampa on Sunday afternoon, and they did not trail, and they won. They did not trail for a second of either of these games. Not only did they win, I feel like that's important to also notice. They did not chase the play for a single second in those hockey games. Where are we at with this team now? Like they lost to Columbus earlier this week, and it was kind of like, oh, this is same old Canadiens. And then they come out and they do something we haven't seen this team do in 15 years. Like how do we judge this team?
I feel like if there wasn't the sideshow on Monday, the Canadiens would probably have won that game. I do think that, the fact that Patrik Laine was clearly being targeted by the Columbus Blue Jackets, Marty had to take him out. But had he been in the lineup, I do think, he has proven, and I know we're going to talk about Carrier in a little bit as well, but he's proven to be everything Kent Hughes wanted from this guy, right? To help the other players, to bring an extra level and so I think anytime he's there, he's elevating the rest of the team. We talked about it a little bit before, and it's not to say that he's doing it by himself. They are, we're going to talk so much about how well the second line is doing, how well everybody's sort of coming together. And it was pointed out on Game Over, actually, after the Florida game, that we're seeing right now the series of games with the intended lineup. Like, you were so excited to see this. And I think we're getting that, right? Like the intended lineup is here. And when something didn't work, they immediately did something about it. Again, another thing didn't work, the goaltending, the backup goaltending situation, Ken Hughes immediately took action, right? Like this is no longer a situation where they're willing to be patient. Like what they're going to do is they're going to give this team the best chance to succeed as much as possible, knowing that they're still early in their rebuild.
Yeah, and I think, I kind of do want to talk about Carrier. 2 points in the Tampa game. That's not really what you're looking for from Carrier. That's certainly not why they brought him in.
You're looking
But
for him to prevent 2 points from happening, is what you're saying.
exactly that. And I find that he's just been I don't think about him when he's on the ice. Like, he moves the puck so quickly most of the time that I don't have to worry about him overthinking and making a mistake. Something I think that Caden Gooley does often is, he overthinks a lot of plays with the puck. I think he can learn a lot from playing with a guy like Carrier, because I think Gooley has the ability to make those quick plays and to move the puck with ease. But watching Carrier do it, I think Gooley could learn a lot from that. But Carrier's been exactly what they advertised him to be when they made the trade with Nashville before the freeze, which is that steadying right shot defenseman. He's not overly physical, but he's not going to be, outmatched in the corners, even though he's under 6 feet. Just a guy that I think is he's already fitting in really, really well here. And he's going to continue to fit in. They have him under contract for a few years after this one. So he's going to grow with this team. Where are we at sort of as looking at this defense as a whole after this Florida series? They gave up just 2 goals in over both of those games, so a goal a game essentially. How much of that was goaltending? How much of that was actually the way the defense played in front of their goalie?
I think it was a little bit of both, and I do want to say that we're going to talk about Dobes in the second segment, but I did feel that they played better in front of him. I felt that they're truly putting it together. And this is the problem, is that when you see this defense do well, all you need is one night where like Mike Matheson has an off night, or like Caden Gooley has an off night, and it all falls apart. So like the Canadiens don't really have a margin for error, but when they're clicking, it looks so good. And going back to your point about Caden Gooley, is that he's not a rookie by any means, right? But he's also not a veteran. Like, he's still growing and learning. And the fact that, he's only playing on his good side now, after so much time playing on his offside and hating it, like, I think that now it's going to enable him to build those habits a little bit better and to become more steady and to become more confident. But what I liked is that when he was doing those things, making those mistakes and overthinking, like, there was always someone there to pick it up. And it wasn't always the goalie. It wasn't always the goalie there to make up for the mistakes that the defensemen were making. And so overall, I think it's not just the defense, but the defensive play of this team, I think did really well in the last couple of games. I'm really, really happy with what I saw.
Yeah. And don't look now, but the Canadiens are 1 win under 500. They're currently 16, 17, and 3. And they're currently only 3 points back of Ottawa for the second wildcard spot. So all of a sudden, this got very tight for Montreal. Like, I'm not saying they're going to make the playoffs. I'm not saying they're a playoff team, but this is the position we wanted them to be in.
We want them to be pesky.
They are in the mix. Trademark Hardy St. Louis from this summer. They're in the mix. They're right there. And they've needed, because of how bad they were earlier this year, they needed to pick up 5 of the last 6 games to get to this point. You know who else had to do that? Ottawa. They had to win a bunch to get back into the situation that they're currently in.
And right now, their goaltender's injured. Linus Ullmark is injured.
They are a vulnerable team right now. And Montreal, like, they have another tough one on Tuesday against Vegas. But if you're the Canadiens, like, you kind of have to feel kind of invincible right now, right? Like,
and
they're just playing incredible hockey.
Right. And this is the thing too, is that we saw them do this in the playoffs a couple of years ago when they beat all these teams that were better than them, because they went in there with that stupid brave mentality, right? Like that feeling invincible, taking those risks. And that's what we want from them. Like, it's not always going to pay off, but the fact that if they have the confidence to take those huge risks, like, that they're at least doing something. They're not resting on their laurels, and hopefully we're not seeing those third periods where they're so passive again.
Yeah. No question. One other person that I wanted to talk about just briefly as we move into our second segment was Cole Caulfield. I thought over the last 2 games in Florida, he really started to assert himself as the focal point of the Canadiens' first line. Yes, Slafkovsky was great. He had an assist on Caulfield's goal in Florida, and Suzuki has made a lot of really great plays over the last few days. But I think that when the puck is on Caulfield's stick in the offensive zone, you feel like he's trying to create something, and not in a way that he's forcing it, but in a way that we haven't seen in a while, where he's recognizing that he has the ability and the skill to put the Canadiens in a situation where they can score when he's on the ice. I think that's a really dangerous thing that he's doing.
He looks cheerful and mischievous again on the ice.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, the way he kind of he did it against Tampa on Sunday, where he had the puck like on the boards, and he just said it was skating backwards and just shuffling his feet, and he shuffled himself like all the way out into the slot, and he had a great chance to shoot. Eventually, those are going to start going in again. He scored against Florida for the first time in a long time, so hopefully this is a sign of good things to come for Cole Caulfield, and we could start to see him score a bit more moving past into the new year. All right. We are going to head into our second segment where we have a rookie goaltender shutout debut to talk about, which suddenly seems silly to leave out of the first segment, but we're going to get into that in our second segment in just a minute. Did Rocket Money help you find any subscriptions you forgot about or that you were paying for twice? That's definitely happened to me. I had a few subscriptions that I didn't even realize I was still paying for, and Rocket Money made it so easy to track them down. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether it's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. For me, one of the best features is the subscription tracker. No one likes paying for subscriptions they're not using anymore, especially when you thought you stopped paying for them months ago. Rocket Money helps you keep track of all your subscriptions. Plus, with their goals feature, you're able to automatically set aside money for your future. No more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/lockedon. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. All right, we are back for our second segment. We have to talk about the start of the career of Jakub Dobes in Montreal. They waived Caden Primo on Saturday afternoon. Sort of odd timing. They couldn't waive him the day before because the holiday roster freeze was still on. So they put him on waivers Saturday just before the game. So luckily they had the roster spot already for Jakub Dobes. They'd been kind of holding that empty roster spot, I think, for a situation like this. Primo gets waived. He ultimately does not get claimed, so he reports to the Laval Rocket. But Jakub Dobes steps in on Saturday in Florida against the defending Stanley Cup champions, and I believe he makes 33 saves in his NHL debut shutout. Funny enough, he wore the number 75. There's only two other players in Canadiens history who have worn the number 75. The last one was Hal Gill. The one before that was Jan Denis, who also had a shutout in his NHL debut with the Montreal Canadiens. So it's very funny how that number is very weird for a goalie, and yet the last two of them that have worn them have pitched shutouts in their first games. What does the beginning of the Jakub Dobes era mean to you? Like, what did that make you feel?
Honestly, I was really impressed. He played, I mean, he's a big guy, right?
Yeah.
He stood tall, but he played aggressively. And I think that the confidence that he showed in his debut, like, it was a tall order. Like, this is like, and we're gonna find out how long it's been since the Canadiens have won this Florida game. You know, like it's been 15 years since they've done the sweep, but it's a tall order. You go in against defending Stanley Cup champions who are still playing really well and giving everybody fits. You come in a situation where the Canadiens are a struggling team, and you come in to a market that is historically tough on goalies, and you stand tall. But not only that, I thought that his body language was amazing. There were, like, obviously there were some situations where you were just kind of like, it's an experience error, but thankfully it didn't end up costing them, right? Like,
Yeah.
I felt like there was certain moments where positionally I wasn't super I didn't feel super confident, right? Where he was in a particular time in the play, right? But he was able to recover, like he was able to use speed, he was able to really, I think, get in the heads of the opponents too, which is like, for a person in his debut, I thought was incredible. Just kind of getting in their faces, not letting them distract him when they're in the scrum. And Florida loves that kind of stuff, right? So I thought that he did that. And I don't know if it was the fact that he was playing really well or if it was just that he was a goaltender, but the team played really well in front of him, right? Like you want to see them have that confidence in their goalie. I really love that performance. Like everything about it didn't scream rookie to me. It screamed a guy who's shown up and says, I want to stay here. I'm here. It's this is my moment. And he really 100% embraced and really embodied that moment.
Yeah. You mentioned that this market can be tough on goalies. It can be. It can also be very, very kind to goalies. If you're great, this market will reward you for greatness. I also think that this market loves when a guy, every market does, but this market specifically, they love when a guy sees an opportunity in front of him and grabs it, right? They love those moments, whether it's, Jakub Dobes right now, or, I'm thinking all the way back to like Dale Weiss, when Dale Weiss was the guy, right? He had an opportunity to see something and he took that team, he was a big part of that run, right? The 2014 run to the conference final. That's the sort of thing that I'm thinking of here is like, can a guy step into a situation and decide I'm going to make the best of this opportunity that I have in front of me? And I think that's what Dobes did. That's an incredibly difficult thing to ask any goalie to do, let alone one who has never played in the National Hockey League before, to come into a situation where you're playing the defending Stanley Cup champions on the road. I would say in front of a hostile fan base, but it was not. It was mostly Canadiens fans, especially as the game, moved into the later stages. And to your point about the Canadiens playing really well in front of him, I thought that was especially evident in the final couple minutes of the third period, because I think they all knew the assignment, which was do not give up a goal right now, which was we're going to lock this down. We're going to get center. We're going to chip the puck in. We're going to make it really difficult for Florida to do anything. They understood what was in front of them. The task in front of them at that point was to make this kid set some history for himself. And, those are the kinds of things that I think teams need to rally around from time to time, right? Like the Canadiens went from rallying around Laine and his return and just getting the mileage out of all of those power play goals. And now they had this opportunity, not only to get Dobes a win, but then as the game went on, okay, we're going to get this guy a shutout in his first NHL start. I think that has to motivate these guys. They're not dumb. They know what's happening. They know they know the situations in front of them. It was just such an incredible moment. And to see like Carey Price tweet about it and say like he was really excited for Dobes, like that was, I don't know. It's greatness, recognizing greatness. It's always nice to see in sports.
Yeah. And like to be clear too, like Jakub Dobes has shown a lot of promise. Like I remember first hearing about him from Patrick Bexell before the Canadiens even picked him. And then the Canadiens did pick him, and Bexell said like this is a guy to keep an eye on. And I'm really excited that it's working out, and I'm also really excited that they're still being patient, right? Like they didn't rush him. Like we don't know necessarily that he's going to be here for the rest of the season, but if he is, that's great. Like that's great.
Yeah.
I'm a tiny bit concerned about what happens to Laval now, but that's only secondary. I feel like he obviously there's going to be a lot of growing pains, but he didn't come in scared and he didn't come in timid. He didn't come in shaky or nervous. He literally stood tall. And I think that's, that bodes well, right? Like he's going to have bad games. Every goalie has bad games. Carey Price had an entire bad season. Like, he is like in his time, he was the greatest goaltender playing at the time that he was at his peak, right? So, I think that if we're patient with him and if the Canadiens continue to play like this in front of him, like it's really going to make for a positive start. And we know that Samuel Montembeault is going to need that help.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? Is they're not bringing him in to be the starting goalie, right? I think people are aware, oh, they're rushing him. They're rushing him. They're not. They're going to use him in situations like this where he's going to get back-to-backs. He's going to get, the rare road start that isn't a back-to-back just to give Montembeault a night off, because it was untenable. The situation before was not going to be able to they weren't going to be able to do that forever. Just like last year, they weren't going to be able to do the 3 goalie thing forever. And I think that this is also good for Caden Primo as a chance to go back to Laval and maybe find his game again. We've seen enough goalies have this not very linear development path where I'm not completely counting out Caden Primo forever. Basu and Gooden made a point of it on their show. Charlie Lindgren is the starting goalie for the Washington Capitals right now. Like it's important to recognize that like not every goalie gets to the same point at the same time, and it's never a linear development path. So hopefully this is good for both of them. I'm very excited to see what we can get out of Jakub Dobes moving into the later stages of the season. But again, it could just be another opportunity for Caden Primo to go to Laval, play with a good AHL team in Laval, and potentially find his game again. And maybe we're having a different conversation later on this season. All right, cool. Well, we are going to leave the goaltending talk there, and we are going to move into our final segment where we'll touch on the second line starting to heat up, and maybe do another What's Up Doc segment. I know there's been some calls for that. So we'll get into all that in just a minute. All right, we are back, and we are headed into our final segment. Laura, before we jump into the talk about the second line, do you want to remind folks of our contest that the entries are now closed?
Yes.
So we're not accepting any more entries, but do you want to give everybody a quick status update on where we are with that?
A status update is that obviously we've taken a couple of days off, but I will be compiling every single entry into a list, and you'll be able to check the list before we run the draw. And all you'll have to do is we'll post it maybe in a Google Doc or something. We'll post it in the show notes so that you'll be able to check it just to make sure. I'll put first name, last initial, and the mode of entry. So let's say we're entering via email. I would put ENB email, and then if I miss you, you can just point to the original like Blue Sky, Instagram, or whatever, and just be like, hey, you missed me. So once we're satisfied that everyone's had a chance to make sure that they're on the list, we will run a draw. And I'll hopefully have the list before we have our 1 day break for the New Year, for the New Year holiday. But if not, I'll definitely make sure that I get it before the end of this week so that we can run the draw ASAP, and somebody can have Ian's precious Carey Price signed, speaking of great goaltenders, signed picture, 13 by 11.
Very excited to be able to send that off to somebody. And again, another chance for us to say thank you for the kind words and for letting us know that you're an everydayer for the show. It means a lot. So thank you. We really appreciate it. And hopefully we can continue in the new year as well to put out the same level of content and even better that you guys have known to expect from this show. So we appreciate you guys coming along for the ride. All right. We have to talk about the second line. We talk about Kirby Dach as this player that we're frustrated with, and it's just not going well. And, the term on-ramp, we've used the term on-ramp since like September, talking about him coming back.
I think he's on the highway now.
I think he's on the highway now. Maybe he's not hitting the speed limit just yet, but he's on the highway. His blinker is on. He's merging into the left lane. Like he's working on it. Those 2 games in Florida for Kirby Dach were probably the 2 best games we've seen from him since he got hurt, right? Like
yes.
that he looked incredible. What do you think is working differently for him since he, what is it just that he potted 2 against Florida and now all of a sudden his outlook on life has changed? Or do you think there's something, a little bit easier there?
Maybe somebody talked to him, honestly, because he seemed like he'd settled down even before he scored those 2 goals, right?
Yeah.
He seemed like he'd settled down. I don't know if it's maybe his teammates, and they didn't get that long of a break. You know what I mean? Like it feels like somebody must have sat him down, had a conversation with him about his confidence. He stopped trying to be things he's not. He stopped trying to rush his own recovery, which I think is important because, we're talking about his blinkers on, he's about to merge. A recovery from an injury like that is also not going to be linear. We talk about goalie development, but like recovery from things like that is not going to be linear. There are going to be setbacks, but I think what he needs to do is he needs to play within his current ability, right? Like this is how far his brain is able to like compute hockey right now. This is how he has to play. And you watch him do that, and he's reaping the rewards and then some. And he's being helped along, obviously, by his line. But if he continues to just stay calm, not try to be too many things, and just try to think about, what is it that I bring to this game? Not what is it that I could bring to this game in a perfect world? What is it that I bring to this game right now? And that's really working out. And the fact that his line mates are also heating up at the same time does help. 100%. And the whole team as a whole is playing much better. That also helps. But I do think that he's not he's not overthinking hockey.
I think that's spot on. And I think, you look at Line and we're kind of having the same conversation with him, right? He's not playing to the top of his ability right now, or to the top of his potential right now. He's playing to the best of his ability right now.
Yeah.
Right. It's so funny watching him with the puck at 5-on-5 when he actually has to move, because like the game slows down. And I'm not saying that as in like, oh, the game is unwatchable when Line has the puck. Quite the opposite. His computer is going at the same speed as his body usually is.
Yeah.
And because of that, he's able to kind of slow everything down, see passing lanes that maybe other players might not see. And it's working for him. I think Dach is starting to pick up on that as well. But I will say, against Tampa, that was the fastest he's looked in some time.
Yes.
He was moving. Like I was encouraged to see that even on the second half of a back-to-back, and even with the injury that he's had and the on-ramp that he's had, he seemed to get faster as that went along, which is leading me to think that a lot of this is mental. A lot of this is between the ears. And he gets those 2 goals against Florida. The second one, a beautiful goal on the breakaway. And I think I think his food's tasting better. His life just is a lot better. Like that's not something that is unique to professional athletes, right? When you're having a good week at work, like your life is just better because it's something you have to do all of the time, and now it doesn't suck all of a sudden, right? Like it's not unique to these professional athletes. So you can probably identify with a lot of that in what Kirby Dach is doing. I know I can. Alex Newhook also, like, he scored against Tampa. He also had his first 2 assists of the season in the Florida game. He didn't have an assist.
That was really fun.
Until what game was that? Game 35 against Florida. Like, that's funny to me.
Get annoyed when that happens because I want like that perfect stat line, right? And it's like now it's ruined. But that's the other thing too, is that you look at like Alex Newhook, it's similar. He's not coming back from an injury, but he is finding his place, right? Like he is being put in a position and he's understanding, how am I most useful right now? Not trying to play like better than he normally is or worse than he normally is in the assignments, right? He's not playing down, he's not playing up. He's literally just, how am I the most useful in this situation? And he's like, and it's looking so good.
Yeah, no, definitely. Some other things I wanted to just touch on before we kind of close out the show. I did mention Marty St. Louis never going to shave again. He's growing a beard for some reason, and I don't know if it was intentional, but they keep winning, so now he's not allowed to shave it. Those are the rules.
I hope someone's talked to him about it.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, he's going to look like Joe Thornton by March if that's the case. But, and we somehow made it through the entire episode without thanking our Lord and Savior Jake Evans, who just scored his 5th goal in 5 games. The price on Jake Evans just keeps going up, both for teams trying to trade for him and for the Canadiens potentially trying to re-sign him. With every passing day, I think that just keeping him is the better option because, and I know that that's like an emotional thought, and that's not how you should run a hockey team. But also, Jake Evans is a really, really valuable hockey player that I think the Canadiens could use.
Yes.
But ultimately, if the Canadiens play themselves back into this race, you kind of can't justify trading him, right?
Yeah. Yeah. There's still some time.
Yeah.
There's still about, like a little over 2 months. No, it's let's say 2 months. There's about 2 months left. So there's still some time. And so the Canadiens don't have to make that decision right away. And I'm really glad they don't. And the thing is, if they hold out right up until the trade deadline, people are going to start getting desperate and overpaying for Jake Evans. So that's what we want. Do not trade him on like January 15th, Kent Hughes.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe someone on Team Canada will get hurt and he'll end up on the 4 Nations roster. Anyway, that's a joke. That's not going to happen. But wouldn't it be funny? Anyway, all right, let's
play for Team Canada.
Yeah, game-winning goal in the gold medal game, Jake Evans. Talking it into reality for him.
We're joking, but Jake Evans is the exact kind of player that scores Stanley Cup winning goals.
Yes. Montreal's traded 2 of those players in recent memory, Arturi Lehkonen and Lars Eller. Those are the kinds of guys we're talking about here. Guys you trade and you regret it the entire time. That's what I'm trying to avoid with Jake Evans, by the way. It's like, that's going to happen.
I'm convinced that Jake Evans is just going to sign back with the Canadiens. So I'm good with him getting traded and us getting, a big return. So like if you're a GM of a team that you think might win the Stanley Cup, Jake Evans, the price is 5 first-rounders and a roster player.
Yes. Exactly. Buffalo will be taking your first rounder specifically. All right. let's hit the trivia. We're making our return to trivia, and then we'll head out for the episode. All right. We talked about Montreal's last sweep in Florida being back in 2009. But Montreal's last win in Florida against the Panthers was on December 28th, 2018. Who had the game-winning goal in that game? Think back to the 2018 Montreal Canadiens. I know it's not super great to think about, but you have to do it for the sake of this question. Who had the game-winning goal the last time Montreal won in Florida? If you have the answer, put it in the comments down below. We'll pin whoever gets it right and shout you out on the next episode of the show. All right, that's going to do it for us today. This episode of Locked On Canadiens. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, go find Locked On Fantasy Hockey. Become a fantasy hockey expert and get the edge over your league mates with daily tips from Steal and Flip. Find Locked On Fantasy Hockey on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We are Locked On Canadiens just about everywhere on the internet. Blue Sky, TikTok, Gmail, lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com. Remember, we're doing our contest. The drawing is closed, but we are going to be announcing those results soon, so stay tuned for that. You can find Laura at The Active Stick. You can find me at Maybe a Teen. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow.